And that's kind of what I needed to hear, because it has been, as for many people, a very challenging year this past year. I had
stop it.
Well,
don't. That's an anti-vortex conversation, and we get why it's compelling. In other words,
Right.
it seems like I should explain why I want that.
Gotcha.
I really would like that because I really don't like this. But don't shore that up. Don't keep that alive in your vibration. Stop it. Meditate it away. Bask it away. Don't keep it active.
I'm seeing, and I've been working on this path and going down this path. Probably started it a few years after Jerry and Esther.
We know.
Yeah,
You're good at it.
You know those.
You're good at it. But the reason that we are hopping right on top of you in the middle of that is because that is the silly thing that you keep doing that keeps it from manifesting. Just that. It's not bigger than that. It is not bigger than facing reality and commenting on it. It's not bigger than that. So if you at least stop commenting on it, and then eventually stop facing it and spend more time talking about what you saw there. That's the story that if we were standing in your physical shoes, we would tell nonstop. We'd tell it to ourselves and tell it to ourselves, and we'd put ourselves to sleep at night thinking about it, and we would relive the conversations that we had with that non-physical energy that was giving that information to you that you so perfectly translated. We'd just tell that story and tell that story and tell that story and reactivate that feeling of invincibility that you had and reactivate that feeling of excitement and enthusiasm and enlightenment that you had. We'd just keep that alive and 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 keep that alive. And we would choke on the other story.
Point taken. Number 2. No, I don't mean this as a negative. I lost my job this year.
Well, we're going to find out how well that point was taken.
Well, this is... I worked for General Motors Corporation.
We don't care.
And got some great experiences from it. And that's the
blah,
positive.
blah,
I'm
blah,
happy.
blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah.
Could you... This is obviously going down or in the career transition point, and it's very exciting. Could you give me some, maybe some ideas of how I might get into furthering this type of work and working in this area?
Well, let's go back to the point that was taken. And that is, we're really not mocking you or making fun of you. We're just pointing out how easy it is to tell things like they are. And you just have to decide that you can't face reality and face your vibrational reality at the same time.
Right.
And you are one of the rare humans on the planet who has a vivid memory of what it feels like to face your vibrational reality. In other words, you just explained something that happened to you that was so big and so vivid and so real and so much a bridge to what we're teaching here, that we just want you to really bring that home and remember that when you tell out of the vortex stories, that you practice the vibration of it. In other words, a lot of people say, well, what does it hurt to just explain it? And we say it doesn't hurt anything. It just prolongs the success that you're reaching for. It just slows down the whole process, and it is so unnecessary. Compelling, we know, because the world who surrounds you really doesn't want to hear your fictitious in the vortex story. They'll think you're a lunatic. They don't want to hear it. They'd rather hear you talk about how you...
Gotcha.
But if we were standing in your physical shoes, as far as any of that, we wouldn't make it audible. We wouldn't put it into any concrete words that anyone could take anything away from. They'll say, "How you doing?" "Really good." Yep. "What happened with your job?" "What? I can't hear you." It's not very satisfying to talk about that with people when, in other words, if you're not giving them meaningful feedback that they can hook into, they'll say, "What's the matter with you? It's like your jaw is frozen. It's like you can't even talk about that." "Yeah, that's pretty much what's happened to me. That's pretty much what's happened to me. Every time I talk about that, I get angry, I get depressed, I get defeated. I feel like it sets me back. And so I've decided to not talk about that anymore, except to appreciate what it gave me and what it has made me want. Now, I'll talk to you all day long about where I'm going, but don't ask me for the details about any of that, because that's all irrelevant. It's water under the bridge. That phase of my life served me incredibly well, and now I'm ready to pluck the fruit from the trees that all provided for me. Get some terminology together. Get yourself ready for that, you see. You don't have to sound like a nutcase to people out there. Just when you speak optimistic, for example, you could say this to anyone and they would not have you committed. You could say, there have always been downturns and upturns in the marketplace. And the upturns are always more readily recognized after a downturn. And I don't think that as individuals, we have to wait for it to bottom completely out before we begin our upturn. And that's my plan. Now, isn't that refreshing?
Well phrased, yes.
In other words, so much of the world, they're just going to complain themselves right to the very bottom. Mm-hmm. They're going to squeeze the last ounce of life out of themselves before. Meanwhile, there are all kinds of people who are well-grounded, who are maybe better financially positioned. In other words, they might have the financial resources that make it easier for them, but there are a whole lot of people that already are getting the financial jump on the future experience because they're not still turning down. They've turned back up. And you can turn up before you have the evidence of it. You can do it optimistically and vibrationally. You can. So you can say to people, I've just decided that I slid far enough and I've turned myself around and I'm feeling optimism and it's serving me really well. And they'll say, well, what evidence do you have? And you say, the only evidence that matters, I've got a skip in my step and a lilt in my voice. Now, maybe that's going too far for some of them, but you got to know it yourself. I feel optimistic. I feel optimistic. I feel optimistic. You know, do you know what percentage of the population it takes to feel optimistic before an upturn that serves the entire planet can begin to manifest?
I do not.
0.1%.
Wow.
0.1%. That might even be high. A fraction of the population has to feel optimism in spite of conditions before the paradigm shift occurs. 0.1%. Now, most people, that wouldn't mean anything to them because they don't know about vibrational reality to begin with. But if you could see it as we see it, with all of this trouble, putting all of this asking over here in the vortex of creation, and just a little bit of the population turning optimistically, which all it would require is turning your televisions off and you'd be there.
Yep. I'm right there with you.
Then, once the starts happening, then people can point to the evidence, and then so 0.1% feeling the optimism without justifiable reason is enough to begin the avalanche of justifiable reason that then the lazier thinkers can then just observe, and then around it goes, and the upswing happens. You see. And whoever it is that's predicting these downturns and upturns and what the economic climates are, we promise you, is benefiting by what they've convinced you to think.
I do believe that. Yep.